one crew, a crashed spaceship, a fight for survival, hostile aliens, boss battles, research centers, questing systems, dialogue systems, tutorial scenes, and a free demo that you can play today has been added to my game since last devlog. I'll give you more info on how you can play the free demo on Nano Planet in just a second. But first, let's roll the tape to when I posted the last devlog 6 months ago. The feedback for my last devlog was astonishing. I had over 16,000 views, many new Discord members, and a ton of great comments that provided me motivation to keep working. I'm genuinely excited for the community that's building around this game. A lot has happened since the last devlog. I've switched jobs, I've created games for different game jams, I've created prototypes for games that I scratched later, I've also created videos and tutorials for this YouTube channel, but then back in October, I finally dove back into Nano Planet, and I've been working hard on Nano Planet since. The past 3 or 4 months, I've been doubling down on it, working on it any amount of free time that I get, and I'm really passionate and motivated to see this project through. Now, the reason I've spent so much time in between this devlog and the last one is because I promised a free demo in the last devlog, and I wanted to make sure that there was a core gameplay loop or minimal viable product or vertical slice or whatever you want to call it available and polished and ready to go when I release this devlog. And I'm happy to say that there is a free demo that you will be able to download today, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in the devlog. If you're new to my channel, I'm currently developing a game about humanity's last chance at survival. The crew flies through a wormhole and lands on a habitable planet. They crash land and find out that the planet really isn't as habitable as they once thought. And then the player is tasked with exploring the planet and the local species and terraforming the planet to make it more livable for all the people that live there. You can get a much better idea about what my game is by viewing the previous devlogs that I've posted on my channel, and I'll have a card to that linked right here. Or you could play the free demo that I'm releasing today, because once you beat the game, you'll have a pretty good idea of what's going on. Also, if you're new to my channel and you like game development or devlogs, or you're just really interested in my game, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so that you can be notified when I release future devlogs. Also, go ahead and let me know in the comments below what you think about this game idea and if you have any other suggestions or things you'd like to see in the game. Okay, let's dive in. I won't be able to discuss everything I've worked on since the last devlog, since I've completed over 158 Trello tasks on my Trello board since that last video. But I'll go ahead and hit the key parts and the major things I've added to the game since then. Now, people always say don't judge a book by its cover, but when you go to the library, the first thing you do is you look at the covers of the books, and then you decide if you want to read the book. Also, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So with that in mind, I decided to make sure the beginning of my game was very captivating and very good looking. That way it would encourage players to play the game and just really get them excited for what the game holds. So the first thing I worked on was creating a 3D planet with a 2D pixel art texture around it that rotates on my main menu. And in the future, I plan on adding updated textures of the planet as you terraform the planet and navigate through the plot line in the story. Now that I had a good cover for the game, it was time to work on something that I briefly mentioned at the end of last devlog, and that was the collections menu. I expanded on the collections menu and added different collection menus depending on the type of item. But then I ran into the problem where I had these menus, but I hadn't even created the items that were going to fill the menu yet. So since then, I've created 9 fossils, 16 minerals, and 16 artifacts to the game that will fill in those slots in the collection menu. Now that I added collection menus to the game, I needed to be able to tell the player that they were actually supposed to collect one of every item in the game. So I created a 2-story research center where the player will go in to turn these items once they've picked them up. And inside that research center, there will be an NPC named Murphy who will do all the research on the items that are turned in. Now that she's in the scene, I needed a way for the player to communicate with her. So the next thing I decided to make was a dialogue system. Now this was a pretty intimidating task as I never built a dialogue system before, but it was actually not as bad as I thought. I just created a dialogue UI prefab and 2 types of scriptable objects, dialogue chains and dialogue objects. The dialogue chain just links different dialogue objects in a chronological order. The dialogue object has NPC text and player responses and various other metadata that is associated with that dialogue object. Now when you interact with an NPC, depending on the conditions when you started the interaction, will depend on the dialogue chain that gets started and then the dialogue objects that get fed through that dialogue chain. Next, I needed a way to determine which dialogue chain needs to be started based off of these conditions. This led me to creating a lightweight temporary version of my quest system. Currently, the questing system is just 2 arrays of quest IDs. There's an active quest array for each NPC and a completed quest array for each NPC. When you interact with the NPC, it just looks at the first quest in the active quest array for that NPC. Once the specific criteria is met for that NPC's active quest, it then moves that quest from the active quest array to the completed quest array. And then the next time you interact with the NPC, you will now get the new first quest in the active quest array. It's a very simple system, but I just needed something up and running for now to get the core gameplay loop in. I plan on revisiting the questing system in a later devlog. The next piece of the research center was to display the item or animal that was donated after it's been donated. It was pretty easy to tie in the logic for this. Whenever an item is donated to the NPC Murphy in the research center, it unlocks a specific item and saves that in the save file. I then turn on that display. Now that I have the display showing, I wanted to add the ability for a player to inspect each item after they've donated it and get more details and maybe a clearer image of what the item was that they donated. So I created this little detailed information UI. This is definitely a work in progress, but this is the first rendition of this. On the left-hand side, you're gonna have a description of the item, and on the right-hand side, you're gonna have the image of the item. Spent about a week creating detailed images for each item, but I definitely wanna reiterate on these as these pixel art images look a little flat and not quite up to my standards. Okay, now that I finished the collection item UI and the research center and all its intended functionality, I needed to give the player a reason to actually go and collect these items. So I created a terraforming machine that once you donate all items of a specific type to the NPC Murphy, she then gives you a canister that you can then bring into the terraforming machine, and that terraforming machine will start to pump oxygen into the atmosphere to make the atmosphere more livable for all its inhabitants. There are currently 5 canisters, and once you've turned in all 5 canisters, you'll reach the game over scene for the demo. But once the game is actually released and you turn these 5 canisters in, that just starts the in-game portion of Nano Planet. And the in-game portion is going to play a lot differently than the storyline portion of the game. But I'm not going to tell you much about that until much later in these devlogs. So now technically I have a core gameplay loop or minimal viable product or vertical slice, but there's a lot of plot holes in the demo as it sits right now. How did the player get there? Who built the research center? Where did Murphy come from? Why did the player just spawn on the planet with a weapon in its hand? These are all questions I needed to answer in the demo, and since I currently don't have any sort of cutscenes, the player's not going to know any of this going in unless they're watching these devlogs. So the first thing I did is I made the player spawn in a crashed spaceship scene. There's a siren going off, and there's one other NPC already awake out of the cryo chamber, and that's Cooper. He's the pilot of the ship, and he's kind of the mechanic and builds majority of the buildings in the game. So your first quest is to go over to Cooper and talk to him and repair the ship to turn the alarms off. After this quest, Cooper asks how the atmosphere was like outside, and you let him know that there wasn't much oxygen in the atmosphere and your astro suit depleted very quickly. He then proceeds to tell you if you turn in a certain mineral to him, he can upgrade your astro suit to allow you to be outside without needing oxygen as quickly. Now this is great, but there's currently no oxygen meter even in the game. So the next thing I did was add a health bar and an oxygen meter to the game. Every time you step outside, the oxygen meter will deplete, and there'll be a little animation in the oxygen meter as it depletes. Once you go back inside, that oxygen meter refills. Okay, so now you have an oxygen meter and a health bar, but there's no way to deplete the health bar. So I decided to create little enemy slimes that kind of bounce towards you. They're pretty harmless, but they do take about 10% of your damage every time they hit you, but they're pretty easy to kill. So now you have a health bar and an oxygen meter and ways for them to deplete. And the way that you regain health is once your oxygen meter is all the way full and you're inside, your health bar will then start refilling. I think in the future I plan on adding it where your health bar refills if you eat food and you have a full hunger bar, but I haven't implemented hunger or thirst bars yet. So after upgrading your suit with Cooper and having an oxygen bar that depletes much slower, he asks you to bring him some materials to unlock one of the crew members from their cryo chamber. Problem is, he needs a certain type of material that isn't just wood or rocks or carbon that drops from those enemy slimes. So he then prompts you to build an upcycler machine. An upcycler is kind of like a recycler, but instead of recycling old stuff, it upcycles basic materials into a building material that can be used on these futuristic buildings. So I had to create the UI for this upcycler machine, and basically depending on what you put into the upcycler on the left, depends on how much upcycled materials or biomaterials that get created on the right. So once you've created enough biomaterials for Cooper to repair one of the cryo chambers, he then repairs Murphy's cryo chamber and she opens up and gets out of the cryo chamber. She then prompts you with a quest to turn in even more biomaterials to unlock her research station. Now you can do that quest, or Cooper presents you with another quest to explore the rest of the island. The problem is, I didn't want the player exploring the island from the get-go. I wanted them to be confined at the beginning so that they would complete the initial quests without getting too confused. So I blocked off the initial crater that the spaceship lands in. There's a big boulder at the top entrance of the crater. I decided this would be a really good spot to introduce the first boss battle. So Cooper asks you to go clear the boulder and explore the rest of the island. Well, when you attack the boulder, the boss wakes up from its little boulder sleep and it starts attacking you. Now this boss has a normal attack that just chunks a boulder at you, and then when he reaches 75%, 50%, and 25% health, he performs an ultimate attack that throws 5 boulders at you, and you have to move out the way to not get hit. Once you've defeated the boulder, you go back and talk to Cooper. He tells you that this place is way more dangerous than he thought, and he gives you a ray gun. This then proceeds to start the next chain of quests from Cooper, which are all about upgrading your biodome so that you can plant plants and capture animals and tame them in that biodome. And then the last quest, once you've unlocked all 3 sizes of biodomes, is a quest on how you actually tame those animals, how you feed them, how you water them, and how you breed the animals to make the little baby animals. Now let's flip back over to the NPC Murphy, which is the researcher. She's been awoken from her cryo chamber and you completed the quest to build her research center. She then presents you with a quest to turn in one of each type of item. So 1 plant, 1 animal, 1 mineral, 1 fossil, and once you've turned in one of each item, she then tells you that she needs each of every item, and so that's when the terraforming quests start. So once you complete those, all the items for each type, you get that canister for the terraforming. So that's basically the quests, and once you've turned in all 5, you get sent to the end scene, which I added like a Star Wars type crawling text at the end that just explains the plot. This is very temporary, this is going to change, but just something for the free demo to allow people to really get an idea of what the plot is if they haven't seen the previous devlogs. Now that all the plot holes have been filled and there's a core gameplay loop, I need to explain some of the absolute basics to some of the non-gamers out there. Like what is move, WASD, or arrow keys. So I created a tutorial scene where you basically just get prompted, hey, use WASD to move, and then you move through this kind of hallway and read this text as you go. And the tutorial scene explains to you how to pick up items, how to move items in your hotbar, how to open and close your inventory, how to move items from your inventory to your hotbar, all the basic stuff you need so that when you enter the first spaceship crash scene and start the quest, you can just use all the info that comes from the quest to complete the rest of the game. So there was one more thing I wanted to create for this video, and that was the Steam page. I started creating the Steam page earlier this week, and as of creating this video, it's in the approval process by Steam. Once it's been approved, I will create a link to that and put it in the description below. Now, if you're wanting to play that free demo, there's 3 things you gotta do. You gotta subscribe to my channel, leave a comment down below, and join the Discord. Once you've done all 3 of those things, message me on Discord and let me know you've done those things, and I will send you a free copy of the demo. Well, that's all I have for this devlog. It's been a long time coming. I've put a lot of work into the game, and I plan on putting even more work into it in 2023. So if you like this content, be sure to like the video, hit that subscribe button, and let me know in the comments some features you'd like to see in this game, or maybe some features you want me to change. That's all I have for you. Until next time, happy coding.